The National Hockey League lockout continues, and if you take a look at our fan poll question, which is how bad will the NHL lockout hurt fan support, 46% of the fans say it won't hurt at all, but 39% say I'll never watch the NHL again, and 15% says who cares? Joining us is Ross McKeon, an outstanding national hockey writer. And Ross, you've covered this sport for a long time. Anything surprise you in our fan poll results?
No, not really. I mean, I know the fans that say they will never watch a game again, and they will. And the ones that say they don't care, they care a little. if they cared enough to answer, they probably care a little. But I do believe that's the true victims here. Those in the bar owners and the vendors and the people that go to the arena to help put on an NHL game, park your car, whatever it takes. Those are the ones that are really getting hurt in this impasse and this lockout, which will probably last at least a couple months.
The thing that surprises me is that when they had the last one back in 2004 and they get a salary cap put in place, it looked like they got their finances under control. I think most people did not think that this would happen again. Why did it happen again?
Exactly. Well, it's happened again because the owners don't like the number that they're sharing the revenues with the players. They want a bigger piece of the pie. The players earned 57% of the revenue, following their agreement of the last contract, and the owners' opening salvo for this deal was, lowering it to 46%. That's the biggest problem, is finding a middle ground on that number. To me, the more this goes on, the more I'm wondering if this, the CBA is kind of like they're taking two whacks to get the deal they wanted. They lost a season in 04-05 to get the salary cap put in, which was really changing the hockey world. Owners said they wouldn't have a deal without it. Players said they would never settle for one, and it cost them an entire season. So they have a salary cap. Probably what happened at the end of those negotiations where the owners weren't really happy with the number that the players were going to, gain in revenues, but they said, we got our salary cap, so let's take this now, and then the next time around, we're going to get our number. So that's kind of what I think what's happening here. It's kind of a two-prong CBA, and this time the owners want to get their number.
An observation on my part, and if I'm wrong about this, please feel free to correct me, but the negotiations between the NBA and the Players Association, the NFL and the Players Association, they were kind of straightforward and tough as well, and they settled over some of the same issues as far as dropping the revenue that the owners were getting, trying to get a little bit more, I should say. Did that trickle down, and is that affecting these negotiations to any degree, or even the strategy of the owners?
I think absolutely. I think, ownership and players and player associations, in one sport definitely keep a close eye on negotiation contracts in other sports. Even if they're somewhat apples to oranges, it's still about, carving up revenues and dividing it between players and owners. No doubt about it. And unfortunately, it seems like every time one of these CBAs expires in any sport, you have to have some sort of a stoppage, which is just terrible for the fans, but that just seems to be the way it is. And I would agree with that. I think they keep an eye on each other. The NHL Players Association is now led by Donald Fair. It wasn't very long ago that he was leading the MLB, players. And then, in 94, 95, they lost the end of a season and a World Series under his leadership. But they got a deal that the players liked thereafter. So now he's in the NHL. I mean, yeah, I think they do look at each other's deals.
I'm wondering, knowing Don as I do, and of course, Major League Baseball had the hardest players association to deal with. They had the strongest contract and everything. I'm wondering what his reaction is to what he's dealing with here, because he had it his way when he was with baseball, and it's anything but that way with the NHL.
Yeah, he's a smart guy, and he's been through these before. I think he knew exactly what he was getting himself into, and I think the players knew exactly what they were getting themselves into by hiring Don Fair, who, he had to be the best negotiator out there, really, from the players' perspective, because he does generally get good deals for the players, or as good of a deal as he can get. So I don't think there's been any surprises here. I think everyone figured this would come to a lockout, and how long will it last is the big question now. But I think the players are very happy with the leadership. I think this is the strongest leadership they've had in the last three contracts, and the owners, they have Bettman for the third or fourth time around, and he's always gotten them a deal. And really, I'm not trying to defend Gary Bettman, but the league has never been stronger, than it is right now under his leadership. And so, these are two loggerheads going at it.
Where do you think the number will finally result to be? I mean, you've got 57% that the players are getting, 46% what the owners are getting. You know, where do they end up being?
Yeah, I mean, is it too easy to say 50%? You know, for those of us without economics degrees, I think one of the harder parts that's underlying with these negotiations is figuring out exactly where revenues come from. Like, for instance, luxury box sales and such, apparently they don't get revenue from that. And I don't understand all this stuff, and I won't pretend to. So I think the first stage, you know, and I'm sure they've been working on this for a while, is just trying to define exactly what the revenues are, where they come from, you know, and then try to cut up the pie. And why is it taking this long? I don't know, but, you know, it seems to always have to do that.
I read where Alex Ovechkin said he may not come back from the KHL over in Russia, and we know that other players have signed on with teams over in Europe as well. What is at issue here? I mean, how reasonable is it to believe that Ovechkin and maybe others might say, this is enough, I've had it?
Right. Well, that makes great copy, but there's no way. The NHL is still the best league in the world. They're still going to pay the best salaries. I am sure the Russian players love living in America, you know, and they'll be back. As soon as they drop that puck, they'll be back. And these are the kind of comments you're going to hear from star players because they're probably being told to say it, you know, from agents and their side, and, you know, both sides are going to talk tough. And but would I believe it for a moment? You know, a guy who's 37, 38, 39, yeah, sure, he might finish his career in his native country, but Alex Ovechkin has got many, many great seasons left in the NHL. He's in his mid-20s, you know. He wants to win a Stanley Cup. There's no way he's going to stay away once they settle.
Ross McKeon is with us, national hockey writer. We're talking about the lockout in the NHL. And let's just say, for instance, they do settle at 50-50. How is that going to affect the game? I mean, what teams might do with the money that they end up getting, and what are we going to see as far as quality of play, do you think, if it ends up being 50-50?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because the revenue sharing will have to continue for the bottom feeding teams. The top guys are going to have to help the bottom ones. I don't think you're going to see any change in play. But what I do fear coming out of this lockout, the last time they had a season canceled, they came back with new rules to take the clutching and grabbing out of the game that allowed the smaller player back into the action, and the game was a lot better. HD television was a whole lot newer in 05, 06 than it is now. And, you know, so there was the excitement of the widescreen television and the high definition. The game looked better on TV. And here's the big one. You had players like Ovechkin, who was a rookie in 05, 06, Crosby, a rookie in 05, 06. You hadn't even seen Malkin yet. He was a year away. Lundqvist was a rookie in 05, 06. Kane and Taves were coming. So there was a reason to be excited for the NHL when it returned. Right now, I can't even name a player close to that group I just listed in terms of a young guy coming that you really want to see. So my big thing is when they do come back, what's different? What is there to get excited about like it was the last time?
And money is not going to solve all of the NHL's problems. I mean, they're still dealing with the Phoenix situation. What other problems are they facing?
Well, that's the big one, I suppose. You know, there might be some other ownership that's not as strong as they would like. However, there are cities like Kansas City and Seattle and Houston and certainly a number of Canadian ones that would love an NHL franchise. So I think as much as Gary Bettman doesn't like relocation, Atlanta went to Winnipeg, and everyone's basically forgotten all about Atlanta now. So those problems can be solved that way. The league itself, I mean, as much as I hate to say it, it's more of a niche sport than the NBA, NFL, or Major League Baseball. They have a new TV contract with NBC, so that's fantastic. We all know the winter game works, and this year's is supposed to be in Michigan Stadium with 115,000 fans. So I don't think there are as many problems to overcome. The only problem right now is the CBA.
We've got about a minute left, but when you take a look at the landscape of professional hockey, are you happy with what you see, Ross?
The game, when we left it last, it was a solid product for everyone. Most of the buildings were filled. The parity in the league, it keeps every team but two or three right in the race in the last month of the season. I don't think, I think there have been less complaints about the product than I've ever heard before. That you didn't hear as much complaining about officiating. The game is good. I mean, personally, I think they play too many regular season games, and sometimes, you go to an arena in the third or fourth month of the season, and you don't always get to see the stars because they're hurt or this or that. But, aside from that, I mean, the game is great. It's never been greater. It was a $3.5 billion revenues yearly, and so, it's never been at that point. So I think that the game is great. It's just not being played right now.
Well, Ross, I want to thank you for your analysis. I've watched and read you for a long time, and you do a great job covering the NHL and professional hockey. Thank you for your insights on the lockout. Take care, my friend.
You're welcome, Ron. Thank
Ross
you.
McKeon, fine national hockey writer. We're talking about the NHL lockout. It's going to continue. We've got you on Sports Byline.